Hello, everyone, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Thursday, the 28th of August. This morning, today's topic is kind of heavy. Yesterday morning, Wednesday morning, I was on my way to work about quarter after 9. I was driving, listening to the news, and I heard about the school shooting in Minneapolis. The two young children, 8 and 10 years old, shot through the windows of the Roman Catholic school where they were gathered for their mass, for their church service. Throughout the day, as I continued to check in on the news and hear how things were going, there was a lot of conversation about gun control, a lot of conversation about mental health awareness, and things like that. And I got thinking about the importance of paying attention to our young people, really listening to them. There was a lot of conversation about Columbine and how things have changed and how they haven't changed since then. And it occurred to me that whereas we're talking a lot about the importance of, guidance counselors at schools paying attention to young people, parents being encouraged to listen to their kids, pay attention to what they're doing, other kids, letting folks know if someone's Facebook notes or posts or their TikTok or their Instagram or their Twitter feed or things are heavy and dangerous or sound like there might be some mental health issues. And at the same time, what was pinging through my head was yes, absolutely, we need to pay attention. We need to be watching our children. We need to be watching our friends to see, do they need help? But then at the same time, I thought, well, hang on. We are, people are advocating for mental health. They're advocating that our young people are hurting. We now have a full generation who have grown up of children who have grown up and become adults, having done live shooter drills. Kids who, where I was in school, it was um, up until grade 8, it was, the big bomb that crawling up, curling up underneath your desk was really going to stop the atom bomb somehow. But also then things like tornadoes, hurricanes, things like that. By the time I was done high school, university, we weren't really thinking about the big things. And now children are being trained in live shooter drills. What do you do as a classroom? How do you tell kindergarten class that, to hide, to get up against, get away from windows, to make sure doors are locked, listen to your teacher, don't talk, don't call people, whatever the things might be. What are we doing to our children that this is how they're growing up? And what what has since Columbine, all of that training, Sandy Hook, um, you know, Parkland, all of those things have led to a society in which kids are aware and are actually preparing for what happens if somebody walks into my classroom or my school with a gun or multiple weapons, semi-automatic weapons. How do I respond? What happened to children just playing? What happened to Red Rover? What happened to skipping and double dutch? What happened to marbles and tic tacs or whatever those things we used to do, hopscotch in the playground? I know I sound awfully Pollyanna and naive, but I am very concerned about what we have done to our society in teaching children to be aware of live shooters and teaching them how to deal with that. Have we at some point contributed to the mental health that might lead young people to become a shooter? Has our society become so focused on guns and all of these things that we're actually contributing to the negative mental health of the very people that we are now saying, and it sounds awful, but really it's rat them out. In the society that we are in, particularly looking at south of the border here, we are living in a society where even the government has set up hotlines. If you know of somebody who is an illegal alien, call ICE and have them arrested. And in the meantime, that dragnet is dragging lots of people in. And now they're talking about, and they're being sincere, and I understand and I applaud them. But the flip side of the conversation with guidance counselors and teachers and parents paying that close of attention to what is a young person, what is a young 15-year-old boy who feels like the girls don't like him. He's not on the football team. He doesn't fit in. He likes to play, Call of Duty and Grand Theft Auto and other things like that on the computer. And he doesn't really have a lot of friends. And his parents both work, and his latchkey kid. What happens if the parents then start paying attention to the kid? Not because, yes, because they love him, not because, though, they want to get to know him better or make sure he's okay, but because they're terrified that he's not. What happens when those parents call the school guidance counselor and say, "We're concerned because we think our child might have access to a weapon. We're concerned because his journal says," I mean, some of the stuff that authors have written, look at Stephen King. Some of the stuff he's written is just downright dreadful. And can you imagine if he'd been a 13-year-old whose family went to the teacher and said, "Look at what my son is writing"? Or all of the other thriller things, the movies, the music that we now accept as regular everyday thing, that there's every summer there's got to be some kind of a thriller, a whodunit about teenagers who killed somebody or somebody's trying to kill teenagers. And it's just an accepted thing. What happens though when the person who's writing that in their journal, because this is an idea for a movie they're going to make, when they're big in Hollywood, what happens when their friend or their parent comes across that without context and calls up their teacher or calls the police and says, "We have weapons in our house because we believe in gun in the Second Amendment. And so we have weapons in our house, but our son is writing these deep dark things." In the attitudes and the environment that is existing in the world worldwide this right now, how safe would that young person feel if their guidance counselor said, "Johnny, I understand that you've been writing some deep dark things in your journal. Have you been thinking about hurting someone or yourself?" First of all, we lose all respect for that person. He's never going to open up to them again. He's not going to trust anybody. There's got to be a way that we can deal with being in relationship with young people, being in relationship with the people in our lives, whether it's our neighbor, our friend, our child, our grandchild, uh, you know, actually paying attention to them and getting to know them so that if they are struggling with mental health issues, we can help them. Because the current temperature of the world right now, I'm not real hopeful that somebody who wrote in their journal or said to their guidance counselor, "I'm really struggling. I'm very angry. I really have issues with this person over here in school. They've teased me since I was in grade 1, and now that we're in grade 12, it's awful. They shove me in my locker. They steal my lunch. They beat me up after school, and I'm really angry." The temperature of the world right now may not necessarily lead the adult that child speaks to or confides in to say, "Johnny, I'm really sorry about that. First of all, how can I help you? How can I help you get through the day? How can I help you feel better about that? And what can I do to help you the next time, you know, teenager X decides he's going to beat the crap out of you? How can we help that not happen? How can we stop him from having that happen?" I'm really scared that that's not the response that Johnny's going to get. I'm scared the response Johnny's going to get is not going to be to Johnny. It's going to be a phone call, 911, to the local sheriff saying, you know, "There's a potential shooter here. This young man is really messed up in the head. He's angry at the homecoming king, captain of the football team, all of the things that, you know, the society loves. And I think he's really going to do something." Guess what? Do you really think the sheriff in that small town is just going to simply say, "Well, let's send a guidance counselor over there. Let me drop by the baseball field and buy him a Coke and we'll sit and talk"? Considering the leadership of the day, and that includes in Canada, many of the small towns, many of the attitudes that people are carrying, I'm terrified that the response would be that Johnny is sleeping in on Saturday morning. All of a sudden, he's woken up with a rifle in his face and his parents crying at the door because somebody is taking the preemptive measure of stopping a school shooter because someone outed his personal thoughts, his concerns. I am in no way advocating for people who would be school shooters or mass murderers. But the fact is that if we take a look at the number of teenagers there are in any of our high schools across Canada or the United States, if we were to really take a look at their journals or their blogs or things like that and find out how many of them, regardless of whether they look like they've got it all together or they're the kid who wears the black, the goth makeup and the black coat and the greasy hair and all that stuff, regardless of what they look like, how many of them would have dark thoughts in their diaries? How many of them feel the world is against them and they wish it could be different? How many of them are angry at other peers or adults? And how many of them never even dream of picking up a weapon and doing something horrible? We do need to do something about mental health in our world. And I am so glad. I saw the other day on the back of a can or something in Canada, we have the kids' help phone. And now it's all like hashtag this and text this number. But it had the old number that I remember teaching my kids in Sunday school when I was between first and second year university. So I was 20 years old. I was teaching Sunday school and I taught every one of my kids 1-800-668-6868. That's the number of the kids' helpline in Canada, and it's still working. We need to help kids to feel that they can come forward and say, I need help, rather than outing them. Because as adults, we often don't do a very good job. We also need to do a much better job about what we do about gun control and who has access to them and what's available and what's legal to carry around. But before we start accusing young people of being potential mass murderers or school shooters, we need to start paying attention to the young people and asking them what they need, not telling the world what we think they might do. We need to take care of our young people. So if you're in Canada and you're a grandparent or a parent or a babysitter or a teacher or a social worker, you probably already know this, but drill into kids' minds 1-800-668-6868. That is the Canadian Kids Helpline. And it does help. And it's been around for 30 plus years. Our kids need help. They don't need blaming. They need help. Have a great day. I'll see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel. I'll keep it lighter tomorrow, I promise. God bless.